Alright, in this section we're going to continue covering vehicles, and we're going to start with vehicle facing and movement. You can see here on the example of the terrain effects chart that I've got on screen for you that all vehicles are going to have their separate types of movement that I've addressed previously, whether it's tracked, off-road, or road, and the different columns are going to show how many movement points it's going to take to move that type of vehicle through whatever type of terrain that you're moving through. Now, vehicles are going to always take and move individually, except if they're using coordinated movement, which we had addressed previously, and they can take, if they're activated together, they can move through in two separate hexes. They don't have to stay together. So as an example, our two Sherman tanks that are right here, they could activate together on their impulse, but they would not have to stay together. One could take and move off in this direction while the other moved off in this direction, as long as they maintain their facing pointing towards the vertexes of the hexes. Now, vehicles are not going to double time, low crawl, or do any types of hit and run maneuvers. They all can assault move or assault fire, but we're going to address that in a later video. Now, like I said, they're going to face a vertex, which is simply the corner of the hexes themselves. So when they're moving forward, they're going to move into one of the two hexes that's divided by their little red arrow. So the Sherman can move forward into one of these two hexes. Now, a vehicle can also move backwards at double the movement point cost of whatever hex they're moving into. So it costs one movement point to move into this road hex. So if this Sherman moved right here, it cost him one, but he can move backwards into one of these two hexes at a movement point cost of 2. Now, they can take and rotate in their own hex at a cost of 1 movement point per vertex that they rotate. So our Sherman could rotate around here like a clock going to any vertex that they want to, but they're paying 1 movement point per hex that vertex they move to. Remember, those spending movement points does make them eligible to be op-fired against. And they also can't take and enter a hex with an enemy vehicle. So our Sherman couldn't continue to drive forward into this hex with this German Stug. He would have to stop somewhere outside of it. Now, when you're using vehicles that have a turret, you're going to use the open or buttoned counters to show which direction the turret is actually facing. And you can change that direction without having to spend movement point cost to do so, but there is an associated penalty with that on the ordnance table itself. And there's a penalty for pivoting your turret or pivoting the entire hull. So make sure you look at the right modifier when you're moving whichever one you're moving. Your turret is going to take an auto pivot towards your target unless you do take and rotate the whole vehicle itself, spending movement points. So like our Sherman here that's facing down in this direction, if he wanted to fire onto this Stug, you would simply place a open counter with the direction of the turret pointed towards its vertex, which would have the Stug in its line of fire and could fire on as normal. But this Stug is a tank destroyer, doesn't have a turret. You can tell it's only got one line of armor values. So if it wished to fire on these American tanks, it would have to pivot in its hex to a different vertex to have them in its line of sight, again opening it up for opportunity fire. Now, there is something else that vehicles can do, and it's called rubbling, and it means that the tank can destroy a light constructed or a bamboo type building. So let's take our Sherman tank here, put it up here, and if it were taking, let's say for our example that this heavy constructed building here, the small one, is a light constructed building. The red dot signifies that it's heavy constructed, but for our purposes, we're going to say that it is a light constructed building. You can take an armored vehicle with a armor value 3 or higher and move into an unoccupied hex, at which point it would be rubbled and you would place a rubble marker down signifying that. However, when you do that, you're going to take and roll a 2d6 roll, and you're going to compare that to the front hull armor value. Our Sherman's front hull armor value is a 5. So on the 2d6 roll, if it's higher than that front hull armor value, then the tank becomes abandoned at that point. So if we rolled a 6 or higher on this 2d6 roll, the Sherman would become abandoned. Now you can also do this with game modules that have bamboo huts. It has the same type of rules that I just stated, with the following exception. It can be done by vehicles with an armor value 1 or higher, and they apply a -2 modifier. So when it comes to rubbling, all tracked or off-road vehicles can do it. If it's a light constructed building, 3 armor or higher. If it's a bamboo hut, 1 armor or higher with a -2 modifier.